At Concord, inside the Museum of Freedom, you may have noticed a large mural on the second floor. The placard in front of it reads, "From Lexington and Concord to the shores of Iwo Jima, from the Sea of Tranquility to the Anchorage Front Line, Americans have fought and died through the ages to secure our nation's freedom. May their sacrifices remind us all that freedom is a privilege afforded to the many, yet hard won by a noble few." As you can tell, the placard is talking about the Revolutionary War, the Second World War, the Sino-American War, and the Sea of Tranquility conflict. As of right now, the conflict is a complete mystery. There's no mention of who the United States Armed Forces were fighting, or why they were fighting, or when. All we know is it happened on the moon. Now, the first thing I would like to untangle is when the Sea of Tranquility conflict happened, which should be easy enough if the mural is in chronological order, which I suspect it is. So naturally, we start with the Revolutionary War, followed by World War II, then the Sea of Tranquility conflict, before finishing with the Anchorage reclamation. By that logic, the conflict happened after World War II, but before Anchorage was liberated from the Red Chinese, so between 1945 and 2077, or 132 years, which gives us a big time frame to work with. Luckily, we humans keep historical records, and there's information we can draw from to get ourselves closer to figuring out when the conflict actually happened. Now, inside the Museum of Technology in Washington, D.C. are records that can help us, with the most important pieces found on the placards beside the Virgo 2 lunar lander and beside the Valiant 12 flag, which read, "On July 16, 1969, the Virgo 2 lunar lander, Valiant 11, became the very first manned space vehicle to touch down on the moon. The Valiant 11's crew consisted of Captain Richard Wade, Captain Mark Garris, and Captain Michael Hagan of the USSA. We salute these brave and noble men who took the very first steps on a planetary body other than our own." And this unusual flag was recovered from the surface of the moon by the very last manned flight to its surface in 2052. With this information, we now know what year the US first went to the moon, as well as the year they stopped going, meaning they went to the moon for 83 years between 1969 and 2052. So did the conflict happen within those 83 years? Yes and no. These records only cover the USSA, who undoubtedly weren't involved in the conflict. To answer the question of when, we must figure out why the USSA stopped going to the moon. Now, 2052 is a significant year in Fallout, as it was the beginning of the resource wars. Anywhere resources could be claimed, they were, and the moon was no different. The reason the USSA stopped going to the moon wasn't a matter of resources, but a matter of safety, as warring nations raced to lay claim over the celestial body, and as such, the US Armed Forces stepped in to either claim it for themselves or to prevent others from doing so, and naturally, a conflict ensued. Somewhere within those 25 years after the USSA stopped going to the moon, but before Anchorage was liberated, the Sea of Tranquility conflict happened, and I'm confident saying that 2052 was the start of the conflict. Which brings me to my next question: who were they fighting? Taking a closer look at the mural, we don't see any signs of who the enemy were. The other events are so well known that those involved are common knowledge. It's the British, the Japanese, and the Chinese, but for some reason the enemy on the moon has yet to be mentioned, which is very strange, but I think it all comes down to the information being lost during the Great War. My theory as to who they were fighting should come as no surprise. You already know I suspect the conflict to have started in 2052, the same year the USSA stopped going to the moon, and the year the resource wars began. If the US Armed Forces were going to fight anyone on the moon, it would be communists, and it would be over resources, much like Anchorage. The moon is, after all, full of valuable resources a warring nation could benefit from, as well as it being one of the few places where you could truly escape mutually assured destruction, and that's exactly why the US built a base on the moon at the Sea of Tranquility. This theoretical moon base is entirely possible due to the technology they had at the time. The Fallout Bible reveals the Garden of Eden Creation Kit, or GEC, to be a compact device, containing a fertilizer system holding a variety of food seed, soil supplements, and chemicals that could fertilize arid wasteland, and possibly selected sections of the moon. While the Fallout Bible is no longer canon sources, such as a terminal entry inside Vault 94, have confirmed that the GEC is a fully self-contained, terraforming module capable of creating and sustaining life even amid a desolate nuclear wasteland. A remarkable piece of survival technology that could no doubt provide a foothold in establishing a moon base, sufficiently feeding a small town with fresh produce. But that's only a part of the process. The personnel would also need somewhere to eat, sleep, exercise, relax, and work. The Van Buren design documents, also known as the cancelled Fallout 3, had scientists at Boulder City making advances in medicine, alternate energy sources, robotics, and power armor. However, their advances produced toxic waste that caused toxic clouds to plague the unsuspecting Denverites. So, as an apology, the military funded a program to create a self-sustaining research dome capable of withstanding a nuclear attack. A dome that was to become the city of the future. A prototype, in fact, for settlements on the moon and other planets. With both GEC and dome technology, the US military certainly could have built a sizable base on the moon, and they could be mining for resources for the war effort, or waiting to re-establish the US government in the event of nuclear war, had other redundancies failed. And this scenario would draw all kinds of attention. There's no keeping the base a secret, as the Sea of Tranquility can be seen from Earth with the naked eye. Anyone with a telescope would be able to explore the base within reason, including China. Can you imagine being at war with the US over resources and then watching them build a base on the moon? The only logical thing to do would be to send your own rockets and build your own base, or to take control of the one that already exists. A conflict would be inevitable, but how would they defend themselves in space? Modern firearms would work, as ammunition contains its own oxidizer, a chemical which triggers the explosion of gunpowder and thus the firing of a bullet, so they probably use those. But the mural shows something else, an energy weapon of sorts. I initially thought it was a flamethrower because of the fuel line, but fire can't burn in the oxygen-free vacuum of space, so it can't be that. Instead, what appears to be a fuel line could very well be a way for the wielder to retrieve the weapon in the event it was dropped. As for what the pistol could be, it slightly resembles the YK-32 pulse pistol from Fallout 2 and Fallout Tactics, an electrical pulse weapon that was developed by Yuma Flats Energy Consortium, found inside the Brotherhood of Steel bunker in San Francisco, and sometimes on random Enclave units around Navarro. Two factions that were once a part of the US military, so I think this could be the weapon they had access to at the time, and could be what we're seeing on the mural. As for vehicles, this is where I can't help but doubt the accuracy of the mural. First, we have the Valiant 11 Virgo 2 lunar lander, the first spacecraft to land on the moon, and the flag which it planted. We also have a rocket, which has yet to be seen in Fallout, but does look surprisingly similar to the Saturn V rocket, which was a part of the famous Apollo 11 mission to the moon, so perhaps this rocket is referencing that. Finally, we have a trio of Stingray Deluxe fighter jets, which are much more useful during a conflict, potentially armed with 4 cannons, missiles and rocket pods, but there's no mention of it being able to operate in space. They do appear several times across Boston, either intact or in pieces, at various crash sites, suggesting they were used for aerial warfare before being knocked out of the sky during the Great War. They were also used as private jets by the elite, but I suppose they could have been converted for space warfare too. However, for them to be useful, they would need to be stored on the moon, as travel time alone would render their response practically useless, suggesting a moonbase of sorts had to exist. And on the subject of travel time, this brings me to a weapon that isn't depicted on the mural, but one I suspect played a part in the conflict, and that's the Delta IX rocket. Inside the Museum of Technology, along the winding balcony of the Delta IX exhibit, is a terminal entry which reads, "The Delta IX rocket, commissioned by the USSA in 2020, was in use for almost 15 years before being converted for military use and having the crew and instrument sections replaced with a nuclear warhead. The Delta IX rocket recorded over 77 successful launches, making it one of the most successful rockets in US history. The longest recorded spaceflight in a Delta IX rocket was the 17-day Zeus 12 mission to the moon. The success rate of the rocket is likely what led to the US military using them, but what if they were chosen for their distance capability? The furthest you would ever need to send an ICBM would be approximately 40,000 kilometers, which is overkill considering that's how far a missile would have to travel around the world and end up back where it started. Yet the Delta IX can travel 384,000 kilometers, maybe more. Other, less valuable rockets exist that could have been used, and let's not forget they already have nuclear warheads. Why convert a rocket capable of traveling to the moon unless that's where you intended to send it? And for that reason, I believe Delta IX rockets were used to fight communists during the Sea of Tranquility conflict. But there's still one thing that doesn't make any sense. We know the Anchorage reclamation involved both the US and China, there's no denying that. While the Sea of Tranquility conflict is practically undocumented, almost nothing is known about this event. Why would one of them be so well known, while the other such a mystery, if the enemy had been one and the same? You would also think that a battle, on the moon no less, would be sufficiently documented, with details of who was involved, the outcome, the technology used, how long it lasted, and maybe even a monument to those who lost their lives, not just a mural and a placard. Surely, if any records were to exist, then where better to look than the Museum of History? We can actually visit the museum, but upon entering, we can only go so far, as most of the exhibits are off limits. Sealed away behind mounds of rubble, there's the American military might of World War II, the Alaskan liberation from the Red Chinese, and the Resource Wars, which only ended because of the Great War. Yet there's something missing. There's no section of the museum dedicated to the Sea of Tranquility conflict, but I think I know why. The reason there's no dedicated section is because of how convenient it fit into the Resource Wars. It wasn't a major battle like Anchorage, but a smaller, more personal conflict that, while impressive and truly a first for mankind, was placed with the other smaller conflicts that started after 2052. And I believe if we were able to explore beyond the blockade, we would find documents and relics dedicated to a time where the brave men and women of the United States Armed Forces fought communists on the moon. Alas, this was merely a theory. Any number of things could have happened. The Sea of Tranquility conflict could be propaganda, or the enemy could have been Zetans, or the Enclave taking its first steps. When it comes to the world of Fallout, anything is possible. Be sure to show your support by liking the video and subscribing if you haven't already for more Fallout content. If there's anything you would like to see in a later video, leave a comment and I'll see what I can do. With that said, thank you, as always, for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.